The United States Border Patrol has achieved what Republican Senate leaders are calling a truly remarkable record, with not a single illegal immigrant released into the country over an entire year-long period. The milestone was highlighted during a Senate press conference where lawmakers credited the dramatic turnaround to policy changes that allowed Border Patrol agents to fully enforce existing immigration law. Senate leaders noted that the transformation occurred in the span of approximately 1 year, representing what they described as one of the most significant operational shifts in the history of the agency. The contrast with the previous administration, which they characterized as having the most open border ever seen with millions of people crossing illegally each year, was emphasized repeatedly. Border Patrol Commissioner Rodney Scott was quoted as saying that the mission of the Border Patrol has never changed. What changed was that agents were finally able to do the jobs they are lawfully asked to do. This framing positions the achievement as a restoration of normal enforcement rather than an unprecedented escalation of border security measures. More than 2 decades after the September 11 attacks, 3 more victims have been given their names, thanks to advances in DNA technology. The breakthrough is the result of work carried out by a team at New York's medical examiner's office, which has never stopped trying to identify those killed when the towers came down. For the families involved, it means a long-awaited answer after 24 years of uncertainty. At the center of that effort is Mark Desire, who was there from the very beginning. On the morning of the attacks, he rushed to Ground Zero with a team from the medical examiner's office, charged with preserving evidence. He has recalled gathering the team's equipment when the South Tower cracked above them, leaving them directly beneath the plume of debris. In that instant, he has said, his only thought was that this was how he was going to die. 24 years later, Desire is an assistant director of the same office, now overseeing the team that continues the painstaking work of identification. What began as an emergency response in the dust of Lower Manhattan has become a long-term mission, one that has outlasted the initial shock of the attacks and settled into years of methodical laboratory work. Karen Reed, who was acquitted of murder after one of the most closely watched criminal trials in Massachusetts, has now turned to the civil courts, filing a complaint against the Massachusetts State Police and the Canton Police Department. In the filing, she says the agencies permitted misogynists and bigots to target her, and that the police will have to answer for what they did to her. According to legal analyst Brian Buckmeyer, the complaint centers on 3 major claims. There are negligence claims aimed at the state of Massachusetts through its troopers, and at the town of Canton through its police, and a further allegation of what is known as civil conspiracy, a combination that frames the case as both institutional failure and coordinated wrongdoing. To prevail, Buckmeyer explained, Reed will have to show that both the state and the city knew of the so-called bad apples within their ranks and failed to remove them once certain facts came to light. The complaint goes further, alleging that some of those officers were in fact promoted, and that the authorities allowed what Reed describes as a miscarriage of justice to continue. An explosion has been reported at a Hanwha aerospace facility in South Korea, according to Yonhap News, as cited by Bloomberg during its live broadcast. The incident is believed to have occurred at the company's Daejeong facility, though details remain extremely limited at this early stage. Bloomberg reported the breaking news during its Asia Morning programming, noting that further information would be provided as it becomes available. Hanwha Aerospace is one of South Korea's largest and most strategically important defense and aerospace companies, operating as part of the broader Hanwha Group conglomerate. The company manufactures aircraft engines, defense systems, space launch vehicles, and various aerospace components. It has been a major beneficiary of the global defense spending surge, with its stock performing strongly in recent years as countries across Asia increase their military budgets. The cause of the explosion has not yet been determined, and there is no immediate information available regarding casualties or the extent of damage at the facility. Emergency response teams are expected to have been dispatched to the site. South Korean authorities are anticipated to provide official statements as the situation develops and more details emerge from the scene. SanDisk shares have delivered one of the most extraordinary returns in stock market history, surging 4,500% over the trailing 12-month period and 640% year-to-date. The memory chip maker has emerged as one of the primary beneficiaries of the global shortage that is gripping the semiconductor industry. According to Bloomberg intelligence analysts, the insatiable demand for memory chips driven by the build-out of data centers, AI servers, and the emergence of AI-powered personal computers has created a structural shortage that may not be resolved until the end of 2028. New manufacturing capacity will take approximately 2 years to come online, with meaningful supply additions not expected until 2027 at the earliest. The memory shortage is being driven by multiple concurrent demand sources. AI servers require massive amounts of DRAM and high-bandwidth memory. Traditional server compute demand is rising as enterprises adopt more AI workloads, and the new generation of AI PCs requires significantly more memory than their predecessors, adding yet another source of demand pressure. Concerns earlier in the quarter that the memory boom represented a pull forward of demand that would sink in the second half of the year have been dispelled by strong earnings results across the hardware sector. HPE, Dell, and Cisco have all reported results that confirm demand is far more durable than skeptics had feared. The 2026 World Cup, staged across North America next summer, is shaping up to be the largest edition in the tournament's history and one of the most lucrative. With an expanded field of 48 teams, including a number of debutante nations, FIFA expects the event to generate billions of dollars in revenue. Much of that money, officials say, is intended to flow back into the sport rather than stay at the top, a point organizers have stressed as the tournament approaches. In the tense lead-up to the first whistle, organizers describe their main worries as practical ones. They want to see full stadiums, and safety is always a central concern when planning a global event on this scale. The other priority is logistical, getting the teams and the star players to the host cities. Officials point to last year's Club World Cup, which drew debate over whether it was the right event, only for the controversy to fade once the matches kicked off and fans filled the stands. The projected television reach is enormous. By FIFA's accounting, the most recent Men's World Cup in Qatar drew around 5 billion viewers worldwide, while the 2023 Women's World Cup reached roughly 2 billion. For the upcoming tournament, organizers are projecting an audience of between 2.5 and 3 billion. To capture that reach, FIFA says it is currently negotiating broadcast deals in China, one of the largest single markets for the rights. New Jersey voters are heading to the polls in a primary election that includes one of the most closely watched congressional races in the country. The 7th Congressional District, a true toss-up seat, could ultimately determine which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives in the next Congress, making the outcome of particular significance for national politics. Republican incumbent Tom Kean is defending his seat in a district that epitomizes the razor-thin margins defining modern American politics. With the House of Representatives so closely divided, any single competitive district in the country could prove to be the one that tips the balance of power from one party to the other. The primary features candidates from both parties vying for the chance to compete in the general election, where the real battle for the district is expected to unfold. Political analysts have identified this seat as one of the handful of races that will receive outsized national attention and campaign spending in the months ahead. Voter turnout in New Jersey has been closely monitored as an indicator of enthusiasm on both sides of the political spectrum. Early reports suggest steady participation at polling locations across the state, with particularly strong engagement in the competitive districts where voters understand the national implications of their choices. Court documents filed in the case of 7-year-old Jordan Duncan's death have revealed a disturbing pattern of missed warning signs that child welfare advocates say should have triggered intervention long before the little girl lost her life. The Long Island child had missed more than 40 days of school before she died in December, an absence that prosecutors now describe as one of several red flags that went unheeded by the systems designed to protect vulnerable children. Jordan had been placed in the care of her father's fiancée, Emily Kelly, under New York's Kin First policy, a framework that prioritizes kinship placement as an alternative to non-relative foster care. Prosecutors allege that evidence of abuse against the child surfaced as early as January of the previous year, months before Kelly gained full custody in April. Despite these warning signs, the custodial arrangement was allowed to continue, and according to prosecutors, the abuse escalated dramatically. Emily Kelly has been charged with murder in connection with Jordan's death. Her mother and daughter have also been charged in the case, suggesting that multiple adults in the household were allegedly aware of or involved in the mistreatment of the child. The explanations provided by those involved have shifted repeatedly during the investigation, further compounding concerns about the circumstances surrounding the 7-year-old's final months. A jury has reached a verdict in the killing of Oshie Sibley, finding Dmitry Popov not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter as a hate crime. The decision brings to a close a closely watched case in Brooklyn, resolving the central question of how to characterize the fatal stabbing. While the jury stopped short of a murder conviction, it concluded that the killing amounted to a hate crime. The verdict means the jury rejected the most serious charge against Popov. He was acquitted of murder, with the panel declining to find that he had intentionally killed Sibley. At the same time, jurors did hold him criminally responsible by convicting him of manslaughter, and they attached a hate crime finding to that count. The case dates back about 3 years. Oshie Sibley, who was 28, was fatally stabbed by Popov, who was then 17 years old at the time of the attack. The stabbing took place at a gas station in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, where the confrontation that led to Sibley's death unfolded. Jury selection is beginning in the Palisades fire arson case, marking a key stage in one of the most closely watched prosecutions tied to the fires in Los Angeles. The start of the process moves the case toward trial. Prosecutors say the defendant, Jonathan Rinderknecht, set the fire at the center of the case. According to their account, it is the blaze known as the Palisades Fire. The consequences of that fire were severe. Prosecutors say it burned homes and forced evacuations in Los Angeles, causing significant disruption across the affected area. Rinderknecht has pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. His denial sets up a contested case as jury selection gets underway. The defense has laid out its central argument. It contends that Rinderknecht is being used as a scapegoat for the city's failure to gain control of another fire, shifting the focus toward the wider response to the blazes. With jurors now being selected, the case is set to test those competing narratives in court. The trial will weigh the prosecution's claim that Rinderknecht started the Palisades fire against the defense's argument that he is being unfairly blamed. A McDonald's manager in California is in the intensive care unit after police say a coworker attacked him with hot oil. The case has highlighted the severity of the injuries the young worker sustained while on the job. The victim has been identified as 20-year-old Jacob Smith. According to his mother, he has second-degree burns over 22% of his body as a result of the hot oil being thrown on him. The extent of those burns has kept Smith hospitalized for an extended period. More than a week after the attack, he was still in the intensive care unit, an indication of how serious his condition has been since the incident. Authorities have moved against the person accused in the case. The suspect is facing multiple charges and is being held without bail as the legal process surrounding the alleged attack moves forward. Investigators are still working to establish what led to the attack. Yuba City Police are trying to determine a motive, with key questions about the case still unanswered. The incident, described as a brutal attack between two workers at a McDonald's, has drawn attention as Smith continues to recover from his injuries. His prolonged stay in intensive care underscores the impact of the alleged assault on the young manager. The Texas city of Corpus Christi is literally running out of water, and despite that reality, its elected leadership has remained unable to agree on a path forward. The standoff has now drawn in the state, with the governor threatening a takeover of the city's handling of the crisis. What began as a local shortage has escalated into a question of who should be in charge of the response. The numbers underline how serious the situation has become. According to one local commentator who said he checked the figures, the reservoirs are at roughly 13% of capacity. That leaves little margin for a city and surrounding area that have already lived through a prolonged dry spell, and it is the backdrop against which the takeover threat is being raised. Crucially, the problem does not stop at the city limits. Corpus Christi supplies water to around 9 counties, which means commentators on the panel stressed this is a regional issue rather than a purely municipal one. A failure in one city's water system would ripple across a much wider area that depends on the same supply. Costco is experiencing the highest gas demand in its entire history as fuel prices across the tri-state area continue to climb. The wholesale giant reports that tanker trucks are replenishing some of its gas stations multiple times a day to keep up with the unprecedented demand from price-conscious consumers. Gas prices across the tri-state area are running near $4.50 a gallon and continue to climb from levels seen just a month ago. New Jersey remains the cheapest option at $4.46 on average, followed by New York at $4.57 and Connecticut at $4.59. All 3 states are down slightly from last week, but up significantly from where prices stood just 30 days ago. The significant price gap between Costco's gas stations and regular fuel retailers is driving a surge in new membership applications. Consumers are discovering that the annual membership fee pays for itself quickly through gas savings alone, with some members saving close to $2 per fill-up compared to neighborhood stations. The record demand at Costco pumps reflects the broader impact of the Strait of Hormuz crisis on American consumers. Iran's continued closure of the critical shipping lane has disrupted oil supplies worldwide, pushing fuel costs steadily higher and putting pressure on household budgets across the country. The New York Police Department used National Gun Violence Awareness Day to announce a milestone it described as a sign of real progress, saying it has taken more than 2,000 guns off the streets so far this year. News 12 carried the announcement, in which officials framed every weapon recovered as a measure of harm prevented and a shooting that may never happen. Alongside that figure, the department pointed to a striking set of crime statistics. Police said that through the first 5 months of this year, New York City has recorded the fewest murders, the fewest shooting incidents, and the fewest shooting victims in its recorded history, with May alone seeing the fewest shooting incidents and victims of any May on record. Officials were keen to stress where those reductions were being felt. In public housing, they said, the first 5 months of the year saw the lowest number of shooting incidents, shooting victims, murders, and robberies ever recorded, improvements that the department said were landing in the communities and on the blocks that have historically endured the most gun violence. The Montgomery County School Board has adopted a $3.7 billion budget that will eliminate more than 400 jobs, a decision that leaves the district grappling with a round of painful cuts. The County Council did not fully fund the school board's financial request, forcing the board to make tough calls about what to keep and what to let go. The result is a spending plan that keeps the system running, but at a clear cost to staff and services. At the center of the squeeze is a significant shortfall. The superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools, Dr. Thomas W. Taylor, described a $36 million gap that the district had to close, against a budget that stands at $3.7 billion. He said the math had effectively dictated the outcomes, leaving little room for maneuver as officials weighed where reductions would fall. The human cost was on full display at a recent meeting. According to the superintendent, the gathering last week was highly emotional, with tempers flaring and people crying as the scale of the cuts became clear. He acknowledged that those emotions were completely understandable, given how much was at stake for families and employees connected to the school system. Iowa voters are casting their ballots in a series of competitive primaries that will shape the state political landscape heading into the November midterms. President Trump gave a crucial last-minute boost to Congressman Randy Feastra by endorsing him for governor just over the weekend, a move expected to significantly influence the Republican gubernatorial primary outcome. Feastra is leaving his seat in the 4th Congressional District to pursue the governor office. That safely Republican district is expected to remain in party hands, but his departure opens the door for a new representative. The endorsement from Trump carries enormous weight in Iowa Republican politics, where the president's influence on primary voters remains decisive. In another significant development, Congresswoman Hinson has vacated her House seat to pursue a Senate candidacy, creating an open seat in a more competitive district. Her decision has set up what could be one of the more closely watched House races in the state during the general election campaign. Among the most anticipated contests is the race involving Republican incumbent Marionette Miller Meeks, who won one of the closest House races in the entire country in 2024. She is facing the same Democratic challenger for the 3rd consecutive election cycle in a remarkable three-peat rematch that tests whether either side can finally break through in this evenly divided district. San Francisco voters are heading to the polls in a primary election that marks the end of an era in Bay Area politics. For the first time in nearly 40 years, the name Nancy Pelosi does not appear on the ballot, with the former House Speaker having stepped down from the congressional seat she held since the late 1980s and which defined the political landscape of the city. The departure of one of the most powerful figures in American political history has created a rare open-seat race in a district that is among the most reliably Democratic in the entire country. Multiple candidates are competing in the primary to replace Pelosi, creating a level of electoral competition that the district has not seen in decades. The race is being closely watched not only for its local significance, but also as a barometer of the direction of the Democratic Party in one of its most progressive strongholds. The candidates represent different factions within the party, from establishment moderates to progressive challengers, who see the open seat as an opportunity to push the party further to the left. Texas will soon be without a permanent chief election officer, just 4 months before voters head to the polls. Secretary of State Jane Nelson has announced that she is resigning, with her departure set to take effect on July 17. She did not give a specific reason for stepping down, which leaves the timing of the move as one of its most striking features as the state moves toward a major election year. Nelson is a familiar name in Texas politics. Before taking on the role of the state's top election official, she served for many years as a Republican state senator. During her tenure of about 3.5 years as Secretary of State, she oversaw 7 statewide elections, a stretch that placed her at the center of how Texans cast and counted their votes. Governor Greg Abbott praised her service after the announcement was made. For now, the question of who will succeed her remains open. Abbott has not yet named a replacement, even as the calendar moves steadily toward November's high-stakes races. Whoever he appoints will step almost immediately into one of the most closely watched election cycles the state has seen in some time, a midterm widely expected to be contentious, complicated, and full of potential challenges that can go sideways quickly. Los Angeles County is investigating 2 separate incidents as possible election interference after ballots were damaged by fire inside an official ballot drop box, and a vote center was vandalized. Both reported Sunday morning ahead of Tuesday's election. The incidents have raised concerns about the security of the democratic process in one of the nation's largest counties. The first incident involved a number of vote-by-mail ballots that appeared to be damaged by fire inside an official drop box at the Department of Public Social Services downtown, on the 800 block of 4th Place. Election officials say the damage appears to have occurred between a scheduled ballot pickup and the next morning's collection, suggesting the fire was set overnight. A separate incident of vandalism was reported Sunday morning at a vote center in Cesar Chavez Park in Long Beach. Officials did not specify exactly what the vandalism entailed, but said election workers responded quickly and early voting operations continued without disruption at the affected location. The drop box involved in the arson incident is back in use today, and the county registrar's office is reviewing both incidents while working to identify any voters whose ballots may have been impacted by the fire damage. Affected voters may need to be contacted to ensure their votes are counted. The United States Postal Service has proposed sweeping new rules that detail how the Trump administration plans to implement its contested mail ballot executive order, revealing a plan that, if it survives legal challenges, would fundamentally alter how mail-in voting operates across the country. According to Live Now Fox, the proposal would create new barriers for mail voting and impose significant new burdens on election officials at all levels of government. Under the proposed rules, states would be required to submit voter lists to the Postal Service, including names, addresses, and ballot mailing information. States that choose not to comply could face the consequence of USPS refusing to deliver their mail-in ballots, effectively forcing compliance. This requirement has raised immediate concerns about both the logistical feasibility and the cost implications for smaller jurisdictions. The proposal has generated significant privacy concerns that remain unanswered. The draft order creates provisions for law enforcement access to voter data, but does not clearly address how the privacy of vulnerable voters would be protected, including victims of domestic violence, whose addresses are typically kept confidential. Election officials across the nation have been asking these questions, but the Postal Service has not yet provided satisfactory answers. A significant shift is underway in financial markets, as bond traders increasingly price in the possibility of Federal Reserve interest rate hikes, rather than the cuts that had been expected earlier in the year. The repricing reflects a growing consensus that the inflationary pressures buffeting the U.S. economy are not temporary, as the Fed has maintained, but structural and persistent. Ed Al-Husseini of Columbia Threadneedle stated that it is entirely appropriate for Fed officials to be thinking about raising rates, arguing that a fundamental shift in the narrative from the central bank needs to take place. Specifically, the Fed needs to downweight the idea that current inflation is driven by temporary forces and acknowledge that the labor market itself has become a source of sustained inflationary pressure. The view from Columbia Threadneedle is that the Fed is currently on hold at roughly neutral levels, but that this stance may not be sustainable if incoming data continues to show economic resilience and persistent price pressures. Bond markets have already begun to move, with two-year Treasury yields rising 3 basis points in Monday morning trading as investors position for a more hawkish path ahead. Bridgewater Associates founder Ray Dalio warned in a Bloomberg interview that markets are rising close to bubble territory. He outlined specific indicators, including how many investors are overexposed and current market sentiment levels. Dalio made a critical distinction between wealth and money. You can create wealth very easily by raising $50 million on a billion-dollar valuation, making someone a billionaire on paper, but you cannot spend wealth directly. Wealth must be sold and converted into money to be spent. According to Dalio, bubbles burst when wealth needs to be converted into money, often because of debt obligations, but potentially also from wealth taxes or other triggers. When there is a lot of wealth relative to the amount of money, there is a vulnerability. On artificial intelligence, AVALW acknowledged that AI will have wonderful implications for productivity over time, but warned of significant wealth gap consequences. A very small percentage of the population is going to do unbelievably well, and a lot of people will not. When asked if society can work together politically to address these wealth disparities, AVALW was blunt. "I am not optimistic on us working together to solve this," he said, suggesting the political will to address inequality is lacking. A commemoration ceremony marking the anniversary of D-Day was held at the National World War II Memorial in Washington, at a site known as the Circle of Remembrance. The gathering brought together officials and foreign military representatives to honor what organizers described as a sacred anniversary. Defense and air attachés from a number of embassies were introduced and thanked for attending. Representatives came from Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom, underscoring the international character of the remembrance. The ceremony opened with a prayer. The invocation asked for faith for the battles of the present day, and for a love that reflects the sacrifice of the one who laid down his life for others, before those gathered were invited to be seated. Jane Dropa, chair of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, delivered the first address. She welcomed those present to the Circle of Remembrance, describing it as a deeply meaningful place to mark one of the most consequential days in modern history. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth used a visit marking the 82nd anniversary of D-Day to deliver a pointed political message, warning that Europe faces what he called an invasion of dangerous ideologies arriving by sea. He made the remarks earlier in the day in Paris before traveling to Normandy, where Allied forces landed in 1944 and where he met with service members. In his comments, Hegseth tied the issue of immigration directly to the legacy of the D-Day landings. By connecting the wartime sacrifice commemorated in Normandy to present-day concerns about migration, he framed the anniversary not only as an act of remembrance, but as a warning about the challenges he argued Europe is facing in the present day. For those who were in the room, the remarks appeared to echo criticisms often made by the administration of President Trump about Europe. Rather than a purely ceremonial tribute, the speech carried the tone of the broader political arguments that Washington has repeatedly directed at its European allies in recent months and years. Central to those arguments is the view that Europe is hampered by weak defenses. Hegseth's framing of an invasion of dangerous ideologies arriving by sea fits squarely within that long-running line of criticism, which casts the continent as unprepared to deal with the threats Washington says it faces from beyond its borders. A British woman has spoken about the loss of her husband, an inmate who was executed in Texas in April, after what she says was a failure to act on new evidence. The woman, Tiana, said simply that Texas had got it wrong, describing a long-distance relationship that ended only weeks after the couple were married. Tiana said she met her husband, James, around 2 years ago, and that the two married in April after a long-distance romance. James was a death row inmate in Texas at the time, and the wedding took place on April 14, a little over 2 weeks before the date set for his execution. James had been convicted of the murder of 2 men outside a recording studio in Dallas. He had initially confessed to the killings, and at the time, boasted that he felt no guilt over what had happened. His lawyers later argued that he had been under the influence of drugs when he made those early statements to investigators. The case against him also drew on unusual material. Prosecutors used rap lyrics that James had scribbled in notebooks to help secure a death sentence, presenting his own written words as part of the argument for imposing the ultimate punishment on him at trial. Connecticut is eliminating nearly $315 million in outstanding medical debt for close to 100,000 residents. The governor's office confirmed that letters are being mailed this week to eligible residents, notifying them that their medical debt has been erased. The program targets residents with income at or below 4 times the federal poverty level, or those whose medical debt represents 5% or more of their annual income. These criteria ensure that relief reaches those who need it most. Since the program was first launched in 2024, more than 252,000 Connecticut residents have had their medical debt completely wiped out. The current round of debt elimination adds nearly 100,000 more beneficiaries to that total. Medical debt remains one of the leading causes of personal bankruptcy in the United States and a significant barrier to accessing health care. Connecticut's program is among the most ambitious state-level efforts to address the crisis. The debt relief comes at a time when Connecticut's healthcare system faces other challenges. A new study shows the state ranks 6th worst in the country for emergency room wait times, with a median time of 3 hours and 18 minutes. The United States has imposed a ban on non-citizens who recently traveled from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, or South Sudan from entering the country for approximately 3 weeks, citing growing concerns about the Ebola virus. The restriction comes as the country prepares to host the FIFA Club World Cup, raising fears that the international sporting event could become a vector for the disease's spread. The Ebola outbreak has already claimed over 200 lives, with more than 1,000 people suspected to be infected. The severity of the epidemic prompted the travel ban, which targets individuals who have been in the affected countries in recent weeks. U.S. citizens returning from these nations are expected to undergo enhanced screening procedures upon arrival. Adding complexity to the situation, Congo's national football team has qualified for the FIFA Club World Cup and has been cleared to participate in the tournament. The team is scheduled to face Portugal in Houston on June 17th, a match that will draw international attention and potentially thousands of traveling supporters from Central Africa. Days after the dramatic explosion of a Blue Origin New Glenn rocket on the launch pad at Space Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral, officials are issuing warnings that chunks of potentially toxic rocket debris could begin washing up along Brevard County's coastline in the coming days or weeks. According to Live Now Fox, Blue Origin has explicitly advised beachgoers who encounter any debris not to touch it, as it may not be safe to handle. The explosion occurred on Thursday evening during a static fire engine test, sending a massive fireball into the sky and shaking houses in the surrounding area. The launch pad burned for several hours as emergency crews waited for the fire to subside. No injuries were reported in the incident, but the damage to the launch infrastructure is expected to take at least a year to repair, according to industry estimates. Beach visitors interviewed by Fox 35 Orlando were aware of the situation and expressed calm responses. "I think the plan is usually if you run into something on the beach, you just phone it in, take a picture of it, and let others handle recovery of it," one beachgoer told reporters. However, some residents have raised questions about whether they should be concerned about potential health risks from the debris. NASA has named the 4 astronauts who will fly its Artemis II mission and laid out a reshaped plan for the flight, describing it as a crude test in Earth's orbit that will help pave the way back to the lunar surface. The agency framed the announcement as a major step in returning humans to the moon and building a lasting presence there, while openly casting the effort as a race to get there before China. The prime crew is led by Commander Randy Bresnik, a 2-time astronaut and former space station commander, who is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot with more than 7,000 flight hours. The pilot is Luca Parmitano, an astronaut with the European Space Agency, a 2-time flyer and the first Italian to command the International Space Station, who is also an Italian Air Force colonel and test pilot. They are joined by 2 mission specialists, Frank Rubio and Andre Douglas. Frank Rubio is a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot and family medicine physician, a colonel and a record-setting astronaut. Andre Douglas, a test engineer and Coast Guard Reserve commander, will be making his first space flight. NASA also named a backup crew member, Bob Hines, a test pilot and Air Force colonel who previously flew as a SpaceX Crew 4 pilot. Officials said Bob Hines has logged 170 days in space across 2 station expeditions and could step into any role on the mission. An investigation has raised pointed questions about how well many widely used cancer drugs actually work. According to the reporting, fully half of approved cancer drugs do not have proof that they extend survival for any of their approved uses. The finding goes to the heart of whether patients are gaining real benefit or are simply being exposed to treatments that may not help them live longer. The report describes a growing recognition within parts of the medical community that some treatments may not be as helpful as patients hope or deserve. One concern is whether certain drugs could be taking away quality of life and making people feel sick without actually extending it. That doubt, the reporting says, has begun to drive a movement among clinicians who want clearer evidence of benefit. At the center of that effort is a coalition described as Common Sense Oncology, presented as a global grassroots group. Its stated aim is to raise the bar in cancer care and to be very clear about identifying treatments that make a real difference in the lives of patients, rather than ones that deliver only marginal or unproven gains. A clinical trial that could help shape the future of breast cancer treatment is underway, and a Long Island patient is among those taking part, News 12 reported. The study is testing a tumor vaccine aimed at certain breast cancer patients, and those involved hope it could eventually move the standard of care forward for people facing the disease. At the center of the local story is Christina Amitrano, who was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2020 when she was just 35 years old. Her cancer was a type described as triple positive with the HER2 protein, a diagnosis she noted would have been considered a death sentence 2 decades ago, but is now far more treatable. Amitrano went through a demanding course of treatment that included chemotherapy, radiation, and infusions. She said that throughout the process, she still seemed like a healthy person, the kind of patient who would never have guessed from the outside that she was dealing with any sort of illness, let alone cancer. She is now enrolled in what is known as the Flamingo-01 Phase 3 clinical trial. According to the report, the study is testing a tumor vaccine given to HER2-positive breast cancer patients who meet certain criteria, part of an effort to find new ways of keeping the disease from coming back. A young Florida boy has become the first patient in the state to receive a partial heart transplant using a living valve, a procedure carried out at Nicklaus Children's Hospital. The surgery is the latest milestone in the recovery of Grayson Gonzalez, whose heart is now healing after open heart surgery and a series of follow-up checkups at the hospital. Grayson and his family live on the west coast of Florida, but his medical story began far away. He was born in New York, where he was first diagnosed with a ventricular septal defect, essentially a hole in his heart. His mother recalled the shock of the diagnosis, saying she felt as if her soul had left her body, and that at 27 she had no idea what lay ahead. Doctors monitored his condition for years. When the time came to decide whether he should undergo a brand new procedure, Grayson's mother did her own research and reached out to Dr. David Kalfa, taking her son to Nicklaus Children's Hospital for a second opinion. It turned out not to be their first connection. The same night, Dr. Kalfa sent an email thanking the family for coming and noted that Grayson's name had sounded familiar. He was not surprised to find his own name on the boy's original operation note. Years earlier, as a surgeon being mentored by Grayson's first surgeon, he had been in the operating room when the child was just 2 months old. SoftBank Group has announced plans to invest approximately 75 billion euros, equivalent to more than $80 billion, in building artificial intelligence data centers across France. The massive commitment represents one of the largest single foreign direct investment pledges in European history and positions France as the leading destination for AI infrastructure on the continent. The investment will be phased, with the first tranche of approximately €40 billion committed for completion by 2031. The remaining funds are expected to flow in subsequent years, though specific timelines for the second phase have not yet been finalized. Bloomberg reports that SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son will appear alongside French President Emmanuel Macron to formally announce the commitment at a major technology event in France. The deal was secured in large part due to President Macron's personal diplomatic efforts, with Bloomberg reporting that the French president directly courted Masayoshi Son over an extended period. Son himself reportedly noted that while SoftBank regularly engages with companies, it was unusual and compelling to receive a direct approach from a head of state, which helped push the investment over the line. The U.S. Department of Justice has charged Jamshed Gomi, a 63-year-old resident of Newport Coast, California, with conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act by providing technology and equipment to the government of Iran. According to the DOJ announcement, Gomi is accused of supplying technology to Iran's government, including its military and nuclear program, while living in the United States and enjoying the freedoms the country provides. U.S. Attorney Bill Esley described the facts of the case as shocking. He stated that Gomi violated U.S. sanctions laws by providing technology equipment that could be used to advance Iran's military capabilities and nuclear ambitions. The charges come at a particularly sensitive time, as the United States and Iran continue to exchange military strikes in the Persian Gulf region, while simultaneously attempting to negotiate a framework agreement on Iran's nuclear program. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act gives the president broad authority to regulate economic transactions with foreign countries during a national emergency. Violations can carry significant prison sentences and financial penalties. The case highlights ongoing concerns about technology transfer to sanctioned nations and the challenges of preventing sensitive equipment from reaching countries subject to comprehensive U.S. sanctions programs. A U.S. soldier accused of cashing in on the Nicolas Maduro raid is back in court. The case centers on allegations that he profited from his access to sensitive details about a secret American operation. Prosecutors have identified the accused as Army Master Sergeant Gannon Van Dyke. They say he used classified information to place bets on the secret U.S. operation to remove the Venezuelan president from power. According to the case laid out by prosecutors, the betting was tied directly to inside knowledge of the operation. The allegation places the conduct squarely within the handling of classified material. Investigators say those bets were highly profitable. By their account, the wagers earned Van Dyke more than $400,000, underscoring the scale of the alleged scheme. Van Dyke has pleaded not guilty to the charges. His denial sets the stage for a contested case as it moves through the courts. With the sergeant back in court, the proceedings continue around the allegations that classified information was exploited for financial gain. The case ties together questions of military secrecy, a covert operation abroad, and the personal profit prosecutors say followed. The New York Knicks are heading to the NBA Finals for the first time in 27 years. Game 1 of the championship series against San Antonio takes place tonight, ending one of the longest finals droughts for a major market NBA franchise. The last time the Knicks reached the NBA Finals was in 1999, when they lost to the San Antonio Spurs. The return to the championship stage has electrified the New York sports scene and generated enormous excitement among long-suffering Knicks fans. Game 1 is taking place in San Antonio, giving the Spurs home court advantage to start the series. The Knicks will look to steal a road victory before the series shifts to Madison Square Garden for the home games. The Knicks' journey to the finals has been built on a combination of strategic roster moves, improved defense, and the development of key players. The team has steadily improved over the past several seasons to reach this historic moment. For the city of New York, the Knicks' finals appearance represents a return to basketball relevance that fans have craved for nearly 3 decades. Madison Square Garden, known as the world's most famous arena, is expected to be the center of the basketball universe when the series arrives in Manhattan. One of the most recognizable quarterbacks of his generation is stepping away from the game. Russell Wilson officially announced his retirement from football, closing the book on a career that turned him into a beloved figure in Seattle and one of the defining players of his era in the National Football League. Wilson made his name as the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, where he spent 10 years and became a central part of the franchise. He is described as a former Seahawks great, a label earned through a decade of success that included reaching the pinnacle of the sport with the team. The highlight of his career came when he won Super Bowl 48, lifting the Seahawks to a championship and cementing his place in the club's history. That triumph remains the moment most closely associated with his time in Seattle and a key reference point as fans look back on his playing days. Rather than disappear from the sport entirely, Wilson is expected to begin a new chapter in broadcasting. According to the announcement, he will join CBS Sports as a television analyst, a move that will keep him close to the game he played at the highest level for more than a decade. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from imposing a set of new conditions on states that receive federal SNAP food aid money, at least for now. The ruling halts the administration's effort to tie the funding to a list of policy requirements that a group of states had taken to court, freezing the conditions before they could take effect. The decision came in a lawsuit brought by a coalition of 20 states, including New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Those states had gone to court to challenge the White House's new conditions for receiving SNAP funding, arguing against the requirements the administration had sought to attach to the federal food aid money. According to the states, the conditions tied the funding to several restrictions that reached well beyond the food program itself. They included measures related to gender ideology and to immigration, along with what the administration described as fair athletic opportunities for women and girls, a phrase quoted directly in the dispute. With his order, the judge stopped those conditions from being enforced while the legal challenge moves forward. The practical effect is that, for now, the states in the coalition are not required to meet the contested requirements in order to keep receiving the federal SNAP money that the lawsuit was fighting to protect. New York is leading a coalition of 7 states in suing the Trump administration over a deal that paid French energy company TotalEnergies nearly $1 billion taxpayer dollars to abandon 2 offshore wind leases off the New York coast. Under the agreement struck in March, the administration canceled the offshore wind leases and reimbursed TotalEnergies with instructions to invest the funds in oil and gas projects instead. The coalition argues this deal violates federal law. The lawsuit involves New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and 4 other states. They contend that the cancellation will hurt their energy grids and local economies while undermining their clean energy transition goals. According to the coalition, the offshore wind project would have generated enough electricity to power more than 700,000 New York homes. Its cancellation represents a significant setback for renewable energy development along the Atlantic coast. The states argue that using taxpayer money to compensate a private company for abandoning renewable energy in favor of fossil fuels sets a dangerous precedent. They say the administration exceeded its legal authority in making such an arrangement. Police in Toledo, Ohio say that 12 people were injured, 2 of them critically, in a mass shooting near a community street festival on Saturday. The shooting unfolded close to a busy local gathering, and authorities moved quickly to respond as reports of gunfire reached them, turning what had been a day of community celebration into the scene of an active police operation. The scale of the attack stunned even experienced officers in the city, with one describing the level of violence as over the top compared with other scenes he had worked. The victims were taken to hospital, and the toll cut across generations, as minors were among those shot, and the wounded ranged in age from 14 to 61. According to the account given by the Toledo Police Department, Officers were initially sent to the area after a report of a person shot near the Old West End Festival. When they arrived at the scene, however, they found that the situation was more serious than a single victim, discovering multiple people who had been shot in the vicinity of the event. A Long Island jury has found a drunk driver guilty of second-degree murder for plowing his car into a nail salon, a crash that killed 4 people. The verdict, reached in the trial held in Riverhead, is among the most serious findings the panel could have returned, reflecting the gravity of a case that horrified the Deer Park community and drew intense local attention throughout the proceedings. The crash at the center of the case was as violent as it was sudden. Prosecutors said the driver, identified during the trial as Stephen Schwally, slammed his vehicle into the nail salon at around 78 miles per hour, tearing into the business and killing 4 people inside. Others were injured in the 2024 crash, which turned an ordinary day at a neighborhood storefront into a scene of mass casualties. The evidence painted a picture of a driver who was severely impaired. Prosecutors said Schwally had a blood alcohol level of 0.17 at the time of the crash, more than twice the legal limit. Beyond the 4 people killed, the wreck injured 9 others, and the jury ultimately convicted Schwally on all 30 counts he faced, a sweeping verdict that matched the scale of the destruction inside the salon. President Donald Trump has said he will nominate Todd Blanche to serve as the Attorney General of the United States, moving to formally install a close ally at the head of the Justice Department. The announcement would put forward for Senate confirmation a figure who has already been running the department in an acting capacity, cementing his role at the top of federal law enforcement. Blanche is no stranger to the president, having previously served as Trump's personal lawyer before taking on a senior government role. According to the reporting, he is currently the acting attorney general, a position he stepped into following the firing of Pam Bondi in April, which left the top job at the Justice Department open and set the stage for his elevation. Since taking over the department, Blanche has made his mark in ways that have drawn close attention. He has accelerated investigations into critics of the president, signaling a more aggressive posture at the Justice Department under his leadership, and reshaping how the agency has approached a number of politically sensitive matters during his time as acting Attorney General. President Trump has reached an agreement with the makers of Zepbound and Wegovy, 2 of the most widely used GLP-1 weight loss drugs, to make them available to Medicare recipients for just $50 a month starting next month. Under the deal, Medicare will cover $245 of the monthly cost, with patients paying only $50 out of pocket. Officials say they have been working hard to push down prices and ensure these medications, which can be life-changing, are accessible to those who need them. Not all Medicare recipients will qualify for the reduced price. To be eligible, patients must be overweight and have at least one of the following conditions: prediabetes, a history of stroke or cardiovascular disease, or uncontrolled high blood pressure. The qualifying conditions cover roughly 10% of Medicare recipients across the country. Health officials emphasize that these medications have a significant impact not only on weight loss, but also on downstream complications such as diabetes and hypertension. The agreement represents a major shift in how the federal government approaches the cost of weight loss medications, which have been largely inaccessible to many Americans due to their high price tags, often exceeding $1,000 per month without insurance coverage. Officials in San Diego have announced the discovery of an elaborate cross-border tunnel in Ade Mesa, near the southern border with Mexico. The subterranean passageway stretched from Tijuana, Mexico, to a purported retail store on the U.S. side, representing one of the most sophisticated smuggling infrastructure finds in the region. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California shared photographs of the tunnel exit on the American side, revealing the scale and sophistication of the underground construction. The tunnel connected directly to a building that appeared to be a legitimate retail establishment from the outside. The discovery was made through a joint operation involving the U.S. Attorney's Office and multiple partner agencies. Authorities believe the tunnel was used for smuggling operations across the international border, though specific details about what was being transported have not yet been publicly disclosed. Ade Mesa has historically been one of the most active areas for cross-border tunnel construction due to its geography and the presence of industrial warehouses on both sides of the border. The area's commercial zoning provides cover for the kind of construction activity needed to build such elaborate underground passages. The disgraced founder of FTX is seeking a way out of prison. Sam Bankman-Fried has formally filed for a presidential pardon. The move marks a new chapter in his high-profile legal saga. It comes through a formal request rather than a court appeal. The timing of the request stands out. Bankman-Fried is only a fraction of the way into his sentence. He was handed a 25-year term. The pardon bid, therefore, comes early in the time he is set to serve. The basis for his imprisonment lies in his conviction. He was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy. Those convictions followed a closely watched case. They placed him among the most prominent figures to face such charges in recent years. At the center of the case was the collapse of his company. The charges were tied to the downfall of his crypto exchange, FTX. The exchange's failure drew global attention. It became one of the defining events in the crypto sector. Bankman-Fried was once a celebrated name in the industry. He was formerly known as the Crypto King. That status made his fall especially striking. His rise and collapse were followed closely by investors and the public. A figure long kept in the background of Jeffrey Epstein's operations has now been brought before Congress. The convicted sex offender's longtime personal assistant appeared on Capitol Hill to take part in a closed-door interview with the House Oversight Committee, which is investigating Epstein. Her testimony marks another step in lawmakers' efforts to understand how Epstein's world functioned. The assistant has been identified as Leslie Groff, and her role was far from peripheral. She served as Epstein's executive assistant for 18 years, a span of nearly 2 decades at the center of his affairs. So central was she to his life that Epstein reportedly called her an extension of his brain. The scale of her involvement is reflected in the records tied to Epstein. A search for her name in the Epstein files returns more than 150,000 results, a figure that underscores how often she surfaced across the documentation of his activities. That volume helps explain why investigators wanted to hear directly from her. Her day-to-day work placed her at the hub of Epstein's connections. Groff scheduled his frequent encounters with celebrities, scientists, and politicians, managing the access that defined his social and professional orbit. She also booked travel for women, a detail that has drawn particular scrutiny given the nature of the case against Epstein. A court in Colorado has reversed the homicide convictions of 2 Aurora fire paramedics tied to the death of Elijah McClain, ordering new trials in one of the most closely watched cases of its kind. The decision sets aside the verdicts that a jury had reached against the 2 medics and restarts the legal process against them. Elijah McClain was a 23-year-old man who died in 2019 after an encounter with police in Aurora. According to the account of the case, officers placed him in a neck hold, and paramedics who responded to the scene then injected him with the sedative ketamine, a sequence of events that ultimately led to his death. The 2 paramedics at the center of the ruling, Jeremy Cooper and Peter Sichunik, had been found guilty by a jury of criminally negligent homicide. Their prosecutions were notable because they extended criminal responsibility beyond the police officers involved to the medical responders who administered the drug. On appeal, however, the convictions did not stand. The appeals court found that the instructions given to the jury during the trial were faulty, a flaw it considered serious enough to undermine the verdicts that had been returned against the 2 paramedics. A jury in Collin County, Texas, has sentenced Carmelo Anthony to 35 years in prison for the murder of Austin Metcalf, the teenager he fatally stabbed at a high school track meet in Frisco. The punishment was handed down in the trial's sentencing phase, which followed Tuesday's guilty verdict and brought to a close a case that had drawn national attention since the killing. With the sentence now decided, Anthony will serve a lengthy prison term for the death of the 17-year-old. The 35-year term fell at the lower end of the punishment available to the jury. Because they had convicted him of murder, the panel weighed a range that ran from 5 to 99 years, and they could have imposed a far harsher sentence. Several observers following the trial had expected a longer term, and the outcome registered as a surprise to some who had anticipated the jury coming down more heavily. A key part of the jury's decision was its finding that Anthony did not act under sudden passion. That determination meant the full 5 to 99-year range applied, rather than the lighter punishment reserved for a killing committed in the heat of the moment. Even with that wider range on the table, the jury settled near the bottom of it, and his youth was seen as playing a role in why the sentence landed where it did. Protests outside the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Facility in Newark, New Jersey have continued for well over a week, with violent overnight clashes between protesters and law enforcement becoming a regular occurrence. The city of Newark has responded by implementing a curfew from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. for a half-mile area surrounding the facility, with Dormis Avenue closed to pedestrians and vehicle access strictly limited. New Jersey Attorney General Jennifer Davenport confirmed that additional protesters were arrested overnight after they arrived at the facility armed with helmets, shields, and gas masks, refusing to comply with the curfew. The area around Delaney Hall has been barricaded off with a visible increase in law enforcement presence, including ICE officers, alongside state police, county and local officials all working together. Governor Sherrill has stood firmly behind the security measures while calling for the private detention facility to be permanently shut down. In a public statement, she declared that violent, chaotic clashes hurt everyone, putting the lives of both protesters and law enforcement in danger, while taking the focus away from the people detained inside and their families. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang delivered a landmark announcement during his keynote address at the Computex trade show in Taipei, confirming that the company's next-generation data center processor, codenamed Vera Rubin, has entered full production. Standing before thousands of industry leaders and technology executives, Huang declared that the chip represents the next major leap in AI computing capability and is now being manufactured at scale. Perhaps the most striking detail of the announcement was the revelation that the supply chain NVIDIA has assembled for Vera Rubin is twice as large as the one built for its predecessor, Grace Blackwell. This doubling of manufacturing infrastructure signals that NVIDIA is anticipating demand for AI processors that far exceeds anything the industry has seen to date, and that the company has invested heavily to ensure it can meet that demand without the bottlenecks that plagued earlier chip generations. Grace Blackwell, the current generation processor, has itself been at the center of one of the most extraordinary technology booms in history, powering the data centers of every major hyperscaler from Microsoft and Google to Amazon and Meta. The fact that NVIDIA has built a supply chain double that size for Vera Rubin suggests the company and its customers expect the second wave of AI infrastructure spending to dwarf the first, with trillions of dollars flowing into data center construction worldwide. Apple has confirmed a new generation of its voice assistant, Siri, at its Worldwide Developers Conference in Cupertino, where the keynote address was underway. According to Bloomberg coverage from the event, the company unveiled what it is calling Siri AI and presented it as a standalone app rather than just a feature buried inside the operating system. The company framed the new Siri as a far more capable and useful assistant, able to do much more than the basic commands long associated with the phrase "Hey Siri." During the keynote, Apple Vice President Mike Rockwell walked the audience through use case after use case to illustrate the expanded functionality. A central part of the announcement is that Google's Gemini underpins Apple's artificial intelligence. According to the coverage, Gemini serves as the foundation model both on the device and overall, running on the handset and in a secure cloud, something Apple framed as an important breakthrough for the assistant. Investors reacted within minutes. The moment Siri AI was confirmed, Apple shares shot up to a session high of about 2.7%, before easing back toward gains of roughly 1.2% as the keynote continued. Analysts described the swing as a mix of buy the news and sell the news playing out almost in real time. Federal officials announced a sweeping crackdown on fraud tied to the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, saying the Justice Department and the Treasury have referred more than 500,000 borrowers for collections and prosecutions over $22 billion in suspected PPP fraud. The announcement came from the administration's anti-fraud task force, which officials said is working state by state to recover stolen money and prosecute those responsible. They cast the effort as part of a wider campaign to root out abuse of the pandemic-era loan program. As part of the effort, officials announced suspensions for 140,000 borrowers across California, Minnesota, and Maine, an amount they said totals $9 billion. The suspensions are aimed at borrowers flagged in connection with the suspected fraud, and they represent one of several batches of action the task force said it is rolling out across multiple states. Officials presented the figures as evidence of the scale of the problem they say they are now confronting. Officials also announced suspensions for more than 27,000 Ohio borrowers, tied to $1.1 billion in suspected PPP fraud. The Ohio numbers were presented as the latest step in a state-by-state approach, with officials framing the action as part of a broader push to correct what they described as past abuses of the program. They said the same methodical, state-level scrutiny would continue to be applied elsewhere in the country. A magnitude 6.1 earthquake that struck off the coast of Cuba was felt hundreds of miles away across Florida, sending tremors through buildings and prompting an evacuation in downtown Miami. The shaking was reported as far north as Florida's Panhandle and down to the Keys, and was even noticed across the water in Mexico. The epicenter lay off the western coast of Cuba, more than 370 miles from South Florida, yet the quake still rattled high-rise buildings far up the peninsula. For a region that rarely feels earthquakes at all, the sudden, unexplained movement was disorienting, and for some residents it was genuinely frightening. Closest to the epicenter, a passenger aboard a cruise ship described the moment the sea floor shifted beneath them. The ship began to shake and objects fell from the shelves, the passenger said, as people grabbed hold of whatever they could. The shaking lasted about 20 seconds, and for a moment those on board feared the vessel had run aground. In Miami, the tremors were strong enough that people inside the Stephen P. Clark Government Center had to evacuate the building during the afternoon. Across the city, residents flooded social media, comparing notes on TikTok and Instagram and asking one another whether they too had felt the ground move beneath them. The victims of last month's deadly implosion at the Nippon Dina Wave packaging plant in Longview, Washington, are now back home with their loved ones. 9 of the 11 victims were released to their families following a procession held on Saturday. The county coroner, state patrol officers, and the victims' families drove together along Interstate 5 through Kelso before arriving at the coroner's office. Video from Saturday's procession along I-5 was shared by local media, capturing the convoy as it moved through the area. At the coroner's office, 9 of the 11 victims were released to their families. The 2 other victims were not part of the procession and were not released at that time. As families remember those who died, new up-close photographs and video from the Department of Ecology's Joint Information Center were also made available. The footage offers a closer look at conditions inside the facility after the implosion. The new footage shows several vehicles engulfed in the facility's courtyard. The Department of Ecology noted that some of the damage visible in the images and video was actually part of the recovery process, not the result of the implosion itself. A new experimental drug is being called a game changer for treating one of the deadliest forms of cancer. A major clinical trial has found that the drug daraxonrasib nearly doubled survival rates for patients with advanced pancreatic cancer, offering hope for a disease that has long been considered among the most difficult to treat. The findings, presented at the American Society of Clinical Oncology annual meeting and published simultaneously in the New England Journal of Medicine, showed that patients who received daraxonrasib lived on average more than 13 months, compared to about 6.7 months for those who received standard chemotherapy. Researchers found that the drug works by blocking a mutated protein that fuels tumor growth in more than 90% of pancreatic cancer cases. This protein target had eluded treatment for decades, making daraxonrasib's success a major scientific breakthrough in the field of oncology. The Phase 3 RA-Solute 302 trial demonstrated that daraxonrasib, taken as a daily pill, reduced the risk of death by 60% for patients with metastatic pancreatic cancer who had already received prior treatment. These results are described by researchers as unprecedented in the history of pancreatic cancer treatment. Berkshire Hathaway has announced the acquisition of Taylor Morrison Home Corp for $6.8 billion in an all-cash deal, marking the conglomerate's first major purchase under Chief Executive Greg Abel. The transaction represents a significant milestone for the post-Warren Buffett era at Berkshire, signaling that Abel is ready to deploy the company's massive cash reserves for large-scale acquisitions. The offer price of $72.5 per share represents a 24% premium to Taylor Morrison's Friday closing price, a substantial premium that reflects Berkshire's confidence in the homebuilder's long-term value proposition. The all-cash structure of the deal is consistent with Berkshire Hathaway's traditional approach to acquisitions, avoiding complex financing arrangements in favor of straightforward transactions funded from its significant cash holdings. Taylor Morrison's CEO Sheryl Palmer will continue to lead the company following the acquisition, ensuring operational continuity for one of America's notable homebuilders. This management retention approach is typical of Berkshire Hathaway's acquisition philosophy, which has historically emphasized allowing acquired companies to operate with significant autonomy under their existing leadership teams. The acquisition comes at a pivotal moment for the U.S. housing market, where homebuilders are navigating a complex landscape of elevated interest rates, shifting demand patterns, and ongoing debates about housing affordability. Berkshire's bet on Taylor Morrison suggests the conglomerate sees long-term value in residential construction despite near-term headwinds, positioning itself to benefit from structural housing demand driven by demographic trends and years of underbuilding. The U.S. Supreme Court will now allow a new congressional map in Alabama that had once been ruled discriminatory, a decision that has already been described as unconscionable and reckless. According to the report, the ruling could cost Democrats both of their seats in the House of Representatives, reshaping the political balance that the previous map had been challenged over. The reversal marks a sharp turn from where the case stood before, when the map at the center of the dispute had been found to be discriminatory. By clearing the way for the new boundaries, the court has effectively allowed Alabama to move forward with lines that opponents argue were designed in a way that dilutes the voting power of Black residents in the state. Alabama State House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels did not hold back in his response, calling the outcome a disgraceful insult to all of the many foot soldiers of the civil rights movement who, in his words, fought, bled, and died for voting rights. His reaction framed the ruling not as a narrow technical matter, but as a blow to a hard-won legacy. Former United States National Security Advisor John Bolton is expected to take a plea deal in a case centered on the handling of classified information. Bolton, who who held the senior national security role during the Trump administration, had been engaged in plea discussions with the Department of Justice, and reporting indicates the two sides have now reached an agreement. Under the terms of the deal, Bolton is expected to plead guilty to a single count tied to the illegal retention of a sensitive document. The arrangement marks a significant turn in a prosecution that had been built around allegations that he held government material he was not entitled to keep after leaving office. As part of the agreement, Bolton has agreed to pay a financial penalty described as more than $2 million. Reporting on the case has put the figure at around $2.25 million and indicated that the charge he faces had carried the prospect of up to 60 months in jail before the plea deal was struck. Prosecutors allege that Bolton emailed sensitive materials to family members, a detail that formed part of the government's broader case about how the classified information was handled. The accusation pointed to the way protected material is said to have moved outside the channels in which it was supposed to remain. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell has announced his resignation from the United States Congress after serious allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced during his campaign for California governor. The announcement came in swift succession after Swalwell first suspended his gubernatorial campaign late Sunday night, apologizing for what he described as mistakes and judgment in his past, while pledging to fight what he called serious false allegations. In his resignation statement, Swalwell acknowledged the difficulty of the situation while framing his decision around his constituents in California's 14th congressional district. He stated that expelling anyone in Congress without due process within days of an allegation being made is wrong, but added that it is also wrong for his constituents to have him distracted from his duties. He pledged to work with his staff in the coming days to ensure they can continue serving the district in his absence. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is reportedly looking into the allegations against Swalwell. Former California Attorney General Javier Becerra, one of the remaining gubernatorial candidates, noted that while Swalwell has done the right thing by stepping aside, the situation is not over because there are still survivors waiting for justice. Becerra, who handled sexual misconduct cases during his time as Attorney General, emphasized the importance of thorough evidence gathering in such investigations. A United States Army Apache helicopter has crashed over the Strait of Hormuz. The incident has been confirmed by U.S. Central Command, known as CENTCOM. It was first reported by the New York Post before the military confirmation followed. The crash adds another element to an already tense situation in the region. The Strait of Hormuz has been a focal point of the broader conflict involving Iran. It is one of the world's most important waterways for oil shipments. A U.S. military aircraft going down there draws immediate attention. The location underscores how closely the area is being watched. According to the earlier accounts, the crew on board survived. President Trump confirmed that the helicopter had gone down. 2 crew members on the Apache were reportedly rescued. The fact that the crew was recovered has been a central point in the early reporting. The cause of the crash has not yet been made clear. President Trump indicated that a report on the incident would be released. For now, officials have not detailed what brought the helicopter down. That leaves open questions about whether it was an accident or something else entirely. As the United States prepares to host what is being described as one of the largest sporting events ever staged by the federal government, immigration enforcement has become part of the planning. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin has confirmed that Immigration and Customs Enforcement will be actively deployed at the World Cup, while insisting the focus will be on security rather than targeted mass deportations. According to the official message, agents will be tasked with policing crime tied to the event. Mullin said ICE and Homeland Security investigations would be out every day fighting against counterfeit tickets, human trafficking, drug smuggling, and counterfeit products, framing the deployment as a matter of event safety. The decision has proven far from straightforward. It has ignited controversy, prompted legal challenges, and triggered threats of strikes from stadium workers across the host cities. At the same time, immigration activists have begun urging both visitors and immigrant communities to understand their rights when interacting with ICE agents and other law enforcement. Murad Awada of the New York Immigration Coalition argued there was no reason for ICE or HSI to be on the ground during the tournament. He said their presence does not provide any additional security and amounts to extra bodies that could be weaponized against communities, noting that New York City already has one of the largest police forces, that the Port Authority Police is a substantial law enforcement body, and that the stadium in New Jersey would see a heightened level of policing regardless. Over the coming weeks, the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to decide whether babies born on American soil are truly entitled to American citizenship under the Constitution, a guarantee that has held for more than a century. The case stems from President Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship by executive order, and tens of thousands of parents across the country are now on edge as they wait for the court to rule. The stakes are intensely personal for families like that of a woman identified as Lily, whose son was born 9 months ago on American soil. When she was 4 months pregnant, she learned that the president had signed an executive order that would deny citizenship to babies born to non-citizens like her, a moment that turned what should have been a joyful pregnancy into a source of deep anxiety about her child's future. The courts put the order on hold just before Lily's son was born, but the relief is far from settled. With her asylum application still pending, she agreed to speak only with her identity protected, citing concerns that she could be targeted by the administration for speaking out about a policy that strikes at the heart of her family's security in the country. SpaceX is preparing what will be the largest initial public offering in history, with a staggering $1.8 trillion valuation that dwarfs every previous IPO. The offering will feature an unprecedented 30% allocation to retail investors, putting ordinary traders at the center of what is typically an institutional-dominated process. In a move that has sent shockwaves through financial markets, Nasdaq has fast-tracked its index inclusion rules, reducing the waiting period from months to just 15 days for megacap companies. Analysts estimate that this change means index funds would be required to purchase approximately $20 billion worth of SpaceX shares shortly after listing, creating enormous forced buying pressure. The IPO structure breaks with tradition in several ways. Beyond the massive retail allocation, news broke this morning that 5% of shares will be reserved for employees, which analysts describe as more normal but still significant given the scale of the offering. The remaining 65% will go to institutional investors through the traditional allocation process. The SpaceX listing is expected to pave the way for other mega IPOs later this year, particularly from Anthropic and OpenAI. If the SpaceX offering succeeds, these companies are likely to adopt similar models with high retail tranches and take advantage of the accelerated index inclusion rules. However, if demand falls short, it could force these companies to reassess their timelines and valuation expectations. Senate Republicans have pushed through a major immigration bill after a marathon session on the floor, Fox News reported. The measure cleared the chamber by a vote of 52 to 47, the culmination of more than 18 hours of work and dozens of individual votes that stretched into the early hours of Friday morning. At the heart of the legislation is a large injection of money into immigration enforcement. According to the report, the bill allots nearly $70 billion for immigration and customs enforcement and border patrol, and is written so that the funding would last through the end of President Trump's term in office. The vote fell largely along partisan lines, with Democrats and some others declining to support the package. One Republican framed the outcome in stark terms, saying that his party had stepped up to do the job Democrats refused to do, while critics on the Republican side accused Democrats of being unwilling to back funding for the border. Democrats, for their part, said they had been holding out for specific changes to how enforcement is carried out. They pushed for reforms such as requiring judicial warrants and banning officers from wearing masks, with one lawmaker arguing that such measures help keep agents accountable and protect both the people being subject to enforcement and the officers themselves. A day after 4 Republicans broke ranks to side with Democrats, Washington is waiting to see how President Donald Trump will respond to the pushback from within his own party and to the renewed pressure to bring the war with Iran to an end. News 12 reported. The vote has placed the conflict at the center of a fresh confrontation between Congress and the White House over who should control the use of military force. The House of Representatives passed a war powers resolution on Wednesday by a vote of 215 to 208, a measure that would halt U.S. military action against Iran. The relatively narrow margin reflected the deep divisions in the chamber over how far the United States should go in its campaign against Tehran, and over the question of who ultimately holds the authority to decide when the country goes to war. The resolution still needs to clear the Senate before it could take effect, and even then it faces a significant obstacle, as Trump would be likely to veto any measure that limits his war authority. For the moment, the vote stands as a forceful statement of congressional intent, rather than a binding constraint on the president's conduct of the conflict with Iran.